I bet you have wondered about why blood is so incredibly visible in water. It is a common observation, right? You get a tiny nick, a microscopic amount of blood gets into the shower water, and suddenly it looks like a scene from a horror movie. What exactly is going on that makes something so small appear so dramatic? The key is to understand what blood actually is. It is not just a uniform red liquid. It is a complex suspension, primarily made up of plasma, and suspended within that plasma are billions of tiny red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. But for our visual question, those red blood cells are the real stars of the show. This leads to hemoglobin. Each one of those microscopic red blood cells is packed full of a protein called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is truly incredible. It is what gives blood its vibrant red color. It is designed specifically to bind with oxygen, carrying it from your lungs to the rest of your body, and then bringing carbon dioxide back. Ultimately, hemoglobin's structure, specifically the iron atoms it contains, is what makes it so good at reflecting and absorbing light in a very particular way. When oxygen binds to the iron in hemoglobin, it causes a slight change in its molecular structure, making it reflect red light and absorb other colors, which is why we perceive it as red. Picture this. Light is made up of all the colors of the rainbow. When white light hits an object, some colors are absorbed and others are reflected. The colors that are reflected are the ones we see. Blood is a fantastic absorber of most wavelengths of light, but it is a terrible absorber of red light. So, red is what bounces back to our eyes. Now imagine billions of these tiny red blood cells, each one acting like a miniature red mirror, or more accurately, a miniature red light filter. Even a minuscule amount of blood contains an enormous number of these cells. When they enter water, they do not just stay in a clump, they disperse. Before you know it, what started as a tiny drop transforms into a cloud of red. This is not because the blood itself is expanding, but because the individual red blood cells are separating and spreading out in the water. Each cell, though microscopic, still interacts with light, contributing to the overall visual effect. First, consider the medium, water. Water itself is transparent, especially when it is clean, like in a shower or a clear glass. This transparency provides a perfect, neutral backdrop. It does not interfere with the light waves reflecting off the blood cells. If anything, it enhances the contrast. Then something interesting happens. When blood enters water, the red blood cells, being slightly denser than water and having specific surface properties, do not immediately sink or clump. Instead, they begin to separate and disperse, especially if there is any movement in the water, like a flowing shower. What emerges is a phenomenon called light scattering. Each of these dispersed red blood cells, even though they are tiny, acts as a scattering point for light. Imagine millions of tiny red specks, each bouncing red light in all directions within the clear water. This dramatically amplifies the perceived volume of blood. The foundation is the sheer number of red blood cells. A single drop of blood contains about 5 million red blood cells per microliter. To give you context, a tiny scratch might release just a fraction of a drop, but even that fraction contains hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these highly visible, light-scattering particles. Building on that, when these millions of cells spread out, they do not form a dilute, pale pink solution like some other dyes might. Instead, because each cell is individually opaque and red, they maintain their intense color even when widely dispersed. It is like spreading out tiny bright red beads rather than diluting a red paint. Where this takes us is a unique visual effect. Instead of fading, the color seems to multiply. A tiny volume of blood creates a much larger area of visible redness. It is not just the amount of blood, but the surface area created by its dispersion that makes it so striking. Let us begin with contrast. Human eyes are incredibly good at detecting contrast, especially against a bland or neutral background. The typical white or light-colored porcelain of a shower, or the clear, colorless nature of water makes the bright red of blood pop with extreme intensity. It stands out like nothing else. As we move forward, think about the psychological aspect. Humans are inherently tuned to notice blood. From an evolutionary standpoint, the sight of blood signifies injury, danger, or a wound. Our brains are hardwired to process this particular color with urgency, making us even more attuned to its presence, no matter how small. Here is where it all comes together. The physical properties of blood, its interaction with light, the transparency of water, and our own biological programming. It is a perfect storm of factors that makes even the most minuscule amount of blood look significantly larger and more striking than it actually is. At the core, it is about surface area and light interaction. Imagine sprinkling a tiny amount of glitter into water. Even a small pinch will make the whole area sparkle because each tiny piece of glitter reflects light individually and disperses throughout the water, catching your eye. Expanding from that, blood cells behave somewhat similarly, but with a consistent, intense red color. The vast number of cells means that as they spread out, they create an optically dense red-tinted zone, even if the actual concentration of blood is very low. In the end, it is not just the color, but the way it presents itself. If blood dissolved completely into water like sugar, it would simply make the water a very pale pink and be much less noticeable. But because it disperses as individual, opaque cells, it acts like a cloud of tiny, intensely colored particles. What is fascinating is how different this is from other colored liquids. Think about dropping a single drop of food coloring into water. It spreads, yes, but it dilutes. The color fades as it disperses. Blood does not quite do that in the same way, at least not initially, because of its cellular structure. The big reveal is that you are not seeing diluted blood in the traditional sense. You are seeing countless distinct red blood cells, each still brightly colored, spread across a larger area. This creates an optical illusion that makes the volume of blood appear far greater than the tiny amount that actually escaped your body. Initially, a drop of blood maintains its integrity due to surface tension. But once it breaches that surface tension in water, especially moving water, it quickly breaks apart. The red blood cells separate from each other, like beads breaking free from a chain, each seeking its own space. Following that, the natural flow and currents in water, think of a shower drain, further aid this dispersion. They act like tiny invisible stirrers, pushing the red blood cells apart and ensuring they spread out efficiently, covering a wide area with their intense color. The final piece of the puzzle is the shape of red blood cells. They are biconcave discs, essentially flattened spheres with indentations on both sides. This unique shape, combined with their flexibility, allows them to tumble and move easily through liquid, rather than clumping together, enhancing their ability to spread and scatter light. Think about how many individual cells are doing this simultaneously. Even if your cut only releases a microscopic amount of blood, the total number of cells involved is staggering. It is like releasing a cloud of red dust, where each dust particle is highly visible and contributing to the overall redness. Adding to that, the sheer contrast against the clear water is what makes it so visually striking. Water is essentially a transparent canvas. When blood hits it, it is like painting a bright red dot on a perfectly white wall. The visual impact is immediate and undeniable. What we discover is that this is not just about the color red being inherently noticeable. It is about the unique physical properties of red blood cells, their incredibly high concentration, and their ability to disperse and scatter light effectively in a transparent medium like water. It is a biological and optical marvel. To understand this fully, consider the sheer optical density. Even a thinly spread layer of red blood cells still contains enough hemoglobin to absorb most other wavelengths of light and reflect red light powerfully. It is not just a faint blush, it is a vibrant signal. Progressing from there, the effect is often enhanced by the lighting conditions in many settings, like a bathroom. Bright, often white or neutral lighting, illuminates the water and the blood cells perfectly, making their red stand out even more against the sterile environment. The conclusion? The striking visibility of blood in water is a masterful interplay of biology, physics, and even psychology. It is not a trick of the light so much as the blood itself playing a trick on our perception, making a small injury seem far more significant visually. Looking closer, we can appreciate that this phenomenon is crucial for survival. In nature, the sight of blood is a powerful signal. It alerts us to danger, injury, or the need for caution. Our extreme sensitivity to its presence, even in minute quantities, is a built-in protective mechanism. Developing this idea, our eyes are naturally drawn to red. It is a color often associated with urgency, passion, and, of course, danger. When something bright red suddenly appears and spreads against a clear, neutral background, our visual system is almost guaranteed to register it immediately. What becomes clear is that blood is not just a simple liquid. It is a complex, cellular substance engineered for specific biological functions, and its visual properties in water are a direct consequence of that intricate design. It is a testament to the marvel of the human body and how it interacts with its environment. Consider how this might even have benefits for medical professionals. The ability to see even trace amounts of blood can be crucial for diagnosis or monitoring. It is a natural indicator, providing immediate visual feedback on internal processes that might otherwise go unnoticed. Evolving from that, it is also why crime scene investigators are so adept at finding even tiny, washed-away blood traces. The inherent visibility, combined with specialized tools, allows them to detect quantities that, to the naked eye, seem to have completely vanished. The outcome is a universal experience, the slight shock and visual intensity when you see that tiny bit of red in water. It is not just red liquid, but a suspension of millions of individual, highly colored particles, each reflecting light and contributing to a magnified visual presence. The process begins with the microscopic scale. Those tiny red blood cells are designed to be efficient oxygen carriers, and their optical properties are a direct consequence of that. They are perfectly sized and structured to reflect red light strongly. Advancing forward, when these efficient little light reflectors hit the transparent, uncolored canvas of water, they immediately become visually amplified. The water allows their individual colors to shine through without any obstruction, and their dispersion makes the signal much wider. What we find is a beautiful example of how simple biological structures can have profound macroscopic effects. It is not magic, it is just really clever physics and biology working together to make sure that tiny bit of red catches your eye every single time. The main thing to remember is that it is a combination of factors: the hemoglobin's intense red color, the cellular structure of blood that allows it to disperse rather than dilute, the clear backdrop of water, and our own innate biological wiring to notice red as a signifier of importance. It all comes together to make that tiny scratch look like a big deal.